Have you ever noticed that the bridge in the Gravesite Plains and the bridge in the Shaman Village are made by the same people? Have you ever noticed that upon the suppressing pillar there's inscriptions which suggest it was not created by the Hornsent and comes from an age far before them? Did you ever notice that there is a secret empire that once existed far before the Hornsent inside the Lands of Shadow? If the answer to that question is no, then rest assured we are going to go into it fully in today's video. A goal of mine by the end of the year is to reach 20,000 subscribers. If, and only if, you do enjoy the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribe as it greatly helps the channel. Without any further dilly-dallying, please sit back, relax, grab some succulent, juicy, tender and mouth-watering prawns if you want, and enjoy as we delve into the secret empire of Shadow of the Erdtree. I was riding around on Torrent trying to get a better view of Shadow of the Erdtree, trying to see something that I might have missed, and I ended up looking at the roads. Something you may or may not be aware of is that roads are a really good indication of empires long since past. A quick example, I live in the UK, so motorways and highways, a lot of them are Roman roads built 1,000 years ago plus. You can mostly tell they are by their long straight stretches. Every civilization in every single age has their own sort of way of designing and building and creating multiple different things, and roads are no exception. There's something that I like to call the main roads inside of Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. You'll notice along the main roads, which are most used leading up to the Shadow Keep, there are worn paths and what looks like little barriers supposedly for horses and carriages to be able to carry goods to Messmer's army. If you look at the construction of the stones, you can see that they have been haphazardly pushed together. They have been moulded with not much care, which kind of suggests the wartime that it was most likely built in. The reason I'm telling you this is to tell you that these sort of design and architectural choices inside of Elden Ring aren't just reused assets and do have a purpose. I needed to explain that before we get on to this next point. About halfway between the Shadow Keep and where we actually arrive inside of the Gravesite Plains, there is a keep, and within it lies Rylana and Messmer's soldiers, but that isn't the important part. Instead, it is actually what the castle is made out of that is important. It is made out of slate-like black bricks. This design later crops up everywhere within the Shadow Keep. It is exactly the same. Now, where on earth they got these black bricks from? No idea. But they use them, and they are a visual indicator of where Messmer's been and what Messmer has built. If you were to remove Castle Enis, just annihilate it off the face of the earth, pretend it never existed, then a very different story appears when it comes to the roots and purposes of this certain area. There are a few routes you can go down, but there are two main ones. One leads to a catacomb, and the other leads to the suppressing pillar. We're going to talk about the catacombs first. Normally when it comes to catacombs are the main attraction, but inside of this example, it's actually the lead up which is the main point. Leading down to the catacomb are piles and piles of discarded Rossus statues. If you don't know, Rossus was an usherer of death. His statue is seen all over the Lands Between. But more importantly, he is a symbol for the Ghost Flame, a symbol for death. These catacombs are filled to the brim with ancient artifacts, dead people and the Ghost Flame. Considering all of this, I really don't think it's a coincidence that one of these main paths leads to here. Remember how I was talking about how architecture is a really important role inside of Elden Ring? Well, that's coming right back up. There are two humongous bridges built by the very same people inside of Shadow of the Erdtree, that being the one near Castle Enis and the one near the Shaman Village. How the bricks are laid is very similar to buildings in and near Elim, but this does not mean that it was created by the Hornsent. I understand at first glance that doesn't make much sense, but we will get into how the Hornsent are really big copycats in just a second. Funnily enough, the presence of this bridge near the Shaman Village actually proves more and more that Messmer is the one that created the Shadow Keep and Castle Enis. If you've been to the Shaman Village, you'll know that you have to use the Oh Mother emote in front of a Marika statue to open the path outwards. If you then add on to that, the Shadow Keep blocks any sort of entrance in or out of the Shaman's land, it's very obvious that Messmer is the one who built the Shadow Keep definitively. He's not just some bloke with squatters' rights. Now we're on to arguably the most important part of why I brought up the two different paths leading from Castle Enis, and that is the suppressing pillar. The suppressing pillar says that it is at the centre of the Lands Between, and that all death washes up here. This is not built by the Hornsent. This is something that has been here for a very, very long time. We can see this by the inscriptions located upon it. In Hornsent culture, we constantly see this double helix symbol. It is quite literally everywhere, and in my opinion, the reason this came about was due to the sort of spiralling pattern of the Erdtree. And yet, the inscriptions upon the suppressing pillar show the Erdtree in a different form. It shows it healthy. It shows the Erdtree having two separate branches going outwards, instead of the WWE strangle chokehold we see inside the present of the DLC. Given that these type of inscriptions are never seen in any sort of Hornsent buildings, it makes me believe that this suppressing pillar was created long before the Hornsent, and belonged to some sort of ancient dynasty. Most likely the same ones who built the roads and who built the catacombs, which coincidentally hold death. Is it a coincidence that this very specific catacomb is really close to the suppressing pillar? Probably, but it's worth mentioning that maybe there is some sort of connection there. Even if it was just to worship this suppressing pillar, because it very much looks like a divine tower. Maybe they went to the suppressing pillar and then afterwards went to the close by catacombs which holds their dead. Honestly, I really prefer this last one simply because it shows us a deeper look into the culture of this empire. Further proof that the people who built these catacombs are in fact of this ancient dynasty is the enemies we see inside it. There are these robed guys holding a baby. Now, they are weird. We are never told their name, only that they wield strange ghost flame sorceries, which strangely enough look very similar to the sorceries used by the fingers inside of the Finger Ruins. I believe that this previous empire was in fact a failed example of the greater will enacting its will upon the lands of the lands between. It would make perfect sense, for if you look at the ghost flame and grace close up, you'll notice they bear a striking similarity. This very same version of the ghost flame that we see also is held in the hands of Rossus, possibly suggesting that Rossus was the sort of god of this age. Adding on to this further, the finger-like sorceries which are used by these sort of strange guys in the catacombs, then I think it's very likely that this dynasty was in fact, like I just said, a failed example of the greater will trying to enact its will upon the lands between, like it would later do and succeed with Marika. Something that also no doubt needs to be mentioned is there is a lot of ghost flame creatures inside the lands of Shadow, like these flying bird guys which are located all around the lands of Shadow. They are found in abundance though around the suppressing pillar. The presence of the ghost flame is everywhere inside the lands of Shadow, and the fact this creature has the ghost flame and is further linked with the suppressing pillar further links to the idea that there was a ghost flame empire and that they built the suppressing pillars. And there is also Sunrealm shield bearing soldiers which hold the ghost flame and spew it everywhere. I know what you're thinking, that perhaps the Sunrealm is in fact this same empire we've just been talking about, but I don't think this is the case. If you look inside the lands between, or at least the base game lands between, because everything we see, Lands of Shadow and the lands between, that was all once one. If you look back at the original, you'll notice that the sort of divine towers are very similar to the suppressing pillars, but not exactly the same. On the divine towers, they all lead to a central point at the middle of the map, aka the White Cloud. The Sunrealm shield seems to be depicting a very accurate representation of the divine towers with a sort of sun in the background, aka I believe the sun is in fact representing the Erdtree in a previous age. FYI, I do definitely believe this is a divine tower, I just think there's walls attached to it that have crumbled over time. The most connection I believe there is between the Ghost Flame Empire and the Sunrealm is shared knowledge. Perhaps these sort of Sunrealm shield guys were emissaries which were later buried in the Lands of Shadow, for they are the only ones of their kind, the only sort of burial site which holds the Sunrealm shield. I'm talking about the Lands of Shadow because there are quite a few places you can actually find the Sunrealm shield inside of base game. Now it is time to talk about the copycat stuff to do with the Hornsent. If you go to a near Elim, you will notice that basically the whole of it is made out of spiral pillars. All of these look very identical to the suppressing pillar. I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that the Hornsent are quite copycatish. For if you then also take into the consideration that the bridges were most likely made from the Ghost Flame Empire, And then you also look at the fact a lot of Aenear Lim is built with the same sort of architectural structure. I really don't think it's too far-fetched to say that the Hornsent took massive inspiration, hell, probably even worshipped the Ghost Flame Empire. This is further seen by the bird-like crucible warriors which are seen in Aenear Lim, are also seen scattered around the Rao ruins. Why is this important? Well, the bridges inside of the Rao ruins are held up by what looks like suppressing pillar-esque shapes, and located all over Rao ruins are suppressing pillar-esque objects. I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that the ancient civilization that resided in these ruins was the same one to do with the Ghost Flame. Very little is known about the Rao ruins, but we know it was destroyed. It is completely broken. Something ginormous absolutely annihilated the bridges, tore them apart. I think a very likely answer as to what happened would be the ancient giants we see in the lands between. Considering their size and the fact we know next to nothing about them, which is likewise the same about the Divine Towers and their big size as well, it's very likely these big giants were somehow related to the creation of the Divine Towers. This is a theory that's been around for a really long time, and I think it fits very nicely with this theory. Now, they are massive. I think they're probably one of the only things that would be capable of absolutely destroying these bridges like we see inside of Rao ruins. It would also explain why any sort of remnant of the two civilizations are so limited. This war most likely happened, both sides suffering a lot of losses, only for the meteor that we see inside the lands between to strike down and destroy what was left of the Sun Realm, leaving meteoric debris upon the Divine Towers. Likewise, with the Ghost Flame Empire, something likely happened, perhaps the Hornsent. A big theme of Elden Ring is betrayal, starting up a new age, only to then be betrayed again. It's this endless cycle which keeps on happening. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Ghost Flame Empire was just one example in a long chain. Something I do find really interesting that I need to mention about the Rao ruins, we actually don't see anything to do with the Ghost Flame there, which I find really interesting. I think there's a big chance that whatever was to do with the Ghost Flame there was completely eradicated. How they did that, I don't know, but there is something fishy going on here, and I wouldn't put it past the Hornsent to abduct the secrets of the Ghost Flame to try and replicate them. The Hornsent built Aenear Lim, and then they built the Divine Gates. Hell, I mean, corpses are literally hanging off the suppressing pillar-esque structures all over Aenear Lim. They definitely took resources from multiple different cultures to reach the heights they did. Sadly everyone, that is the end of the video. If you did enjoy, please consider leaving a like and subscribe as it greatly helps the channel. Without any further dilly-dallying, please friends, don't you dare go hollow. And may you find your worth in the waking world. See you in the next one, and goodbye.